Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to another New Year's Eve special edition of Core Call with Ronnie Nunn. Ronnie, I trust your New Year's resolutions will be something worthwhile.
Yes, I'm going to keep them secret so I don't put my foot in my mouth.
All right, good idea. Kind of like when you're wishing on a birthday cake, I'd imagine.
Exactly.
So, let's move on to our first play, which was when the Timberwolves and the Mavericks hooked up in a classic game, and it came down to a 198 score in favor of the Mavs, and they get an open shot for Kevin Love, or not so open because Shawn Marion came over. So we have a couple things to talk about. Marion was able to strip the ball. There was no call, and everyone got up in arms. What did you see? And more importantly, were the refs really in a position to see the foul?
You know, the refs were really in a great position, and there's really one referee to see that play, and that's the referee on the baseline, actually out there in the corner. What I like about it is he's out there officiating that one play, and obviously that's the play of the game. And but I think he really believes that he sees hand and ball. But I think if he looks at it close and gets another chance at it, of course in slow-mo, which you can't, he would probably see wrist to hand. And wrist to hand is a foul. You know, one of the issues and one of the things you know as a referee that you begin to learn about is the trajectory of a ball on a strip. Not often, but a higher percentage of the time, if you get a lot of ball, it goes in the direction of where the defender actually made his slap for it. So if it's down slap, you'll find a ball going down. Or if it's an up slap, it'll go up. And of course, if it's a cross, it will go across. And those are your cleanest strips. But in this case, the ball kind of floats up. When you see a ball that floats up, two things can happen. One, could be all ball and the player is so strong, he didn't let it go and it took away from where he was going, which was upward. Or the fact that, you know, the ball actually slips out of the guy's hands and it goes up. But when it comes up softly like that, it's usually an arm in the way that created not the full force of the ball going upward, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, and fascinating. Again, this show will always teach you something. We have a lot more in store, but that one, I'm sure, is another fundamental of the refereeing that people don't realize. So basically, a great way to mitigate that is, yeah, if you see that ball slowly leak out on the way up, even though he's coming down on it, that seems pretty reasonable to me that is a foul where he gets him on the wrist. Now, is it possible that the referee in the baseline was in a specific angle where he couldn't quite, see it for sure and was willing to sort of say, I couldn't see it, so I can't call it?
Yes, and I want to grant him that for one reason. The slap of the ball came at him. It wasn't in front of him. It was on the right side of Love. So he's seeing the right hand of Love on getting ready for the shot as he goes upward. So when he sees that ball being hit, he doesn't have a completely clear look, in all fairness to the person who's a human being. So, but again, you've got to use some of those other little techniques to kind of recognize what you have on a shot like that, especially from a real good shooter. I mean, real good shooters go up strong when they're near the hoop, but on the perimeter, they go up smoothly because they're good shooters. They don't have to over-tighten the ball or anything like that. The play really needed a foul, and as I think we all know now, the NBA recognized the fact that it was a foul. So I think it was a wrist to hand foul, which made it difficult for him.
Right, and even though the NBA acknowledges that it should have been a foul, I don't think it makes the Timberwolves fans feel any better. But perhaps they'll get their season righted and win some more of these games and maybe not be so close to begin with at the end. So, well, let's move on to the Heat. We're playing the Lakers in a what would have been a marquee matchup had Kobe been able to stay healthy. And it became wasn't a very close game. And LeBron James had a number of dunks and put on a show. One of them was a dunk, and D'Antoni was obviously so upset with his defense, he called timeout immediately. That allowed LeBron James to hang on the rim as the cameras were going to commercial. Ronnie, is this a technical foul?
You know, this is an interesting kind of play. The answer is yes. It should have been a technical foul. And the reason why there was a softness about it is it went directly and immediately to a timeout to sort of deplete the situation. Of course, the opposing team is going to do that quickly before there's any fanfare, for a great player like this. But the bottom line is he really hung too long. And he could have been stretching his arms out. He could have been just saying, I'm happy with the timeout myself, and I'm just going to hang here. The fact that hang was something one does with little children in the park and all the little places that they can grow and climb and hang, the rim is not one of them. And he just hung too long. That kind of play can allow for a long arm to hang for a bit, just common sense, and let the guy come down. But he just stayed up there. And even though he didn't bring his knees up and he didn't swivel and he didn't slap the board or do anything crazy, it was just too long. Not good cosmetically for the game.
Yeah, and a nice long stare into the cameras. I mean, it was all sort of, almost choreographed in a way that was troubling a little bit. I'm not going to go crazy over it. The game was over, and he's probably looking for ways to make the game interesting as they go through this long slog. But yeah, I agree with you on that one. And at that point, there's a certain time limit where he just needs to let go and get back to that huddle. Let's move on to the Clippers and the Suns, where Bledsoe had to return back to his old team. And Bledsoe and Dragic are becoming one of the best backcourts in the league, improbably. And Bledsoe goes to the rim and does a crab dribble. This is the notion that LeBron popularized where you take a dribble and a hop almost at the same time, and you can cover distance, land on both feet, and then you can still jump again. It's controversial. Ronnie, what's the official line by the NBA on whether or not these things are really, truly legal?
Well, on this particular play, this crab dribble is an interesting piece. And I'm going to give you a shocker here. This is not a travel. And I believe people are getting confused with the action of how something looks kind of crab-like. But it really isn't. What happens is we can see that when Bledsoe picks up that ball, finishing his dribble or gathering the ball, whichever way you want to say it, his left foot is down. And then what he does is he goes up, comes down on his right, then goes to his left. So when you gather a ball on your left foot, you actually can return to your left foot after you put a right foot down. So this is really a two-step unique kind of a dribble to the hoop. And if people would start recognize that tempo, that rhythm, that cadence, they will see that plays that they think are travels are really not. And in this case, remember again, he gathers with his left, he goes to his right, comes back to his left. The right-left is tighter. It's not a jump stop, but he's allowed to have that kind of stepping.
Absolutely, and we teach this at the high school level, and we've always seen it called when the second it gets slightly awkward is when the referee suddenly out of nowhere will call. He just assumes it must be a travel. Very frustrating because when we do the Euro steps and we do those crab dribbles, the second that there's any kind of, even though the footwork is still the same, but there's something about it, that's when people get up in arms. It's that cosmetic notion. But again, the fundamental play is not a travel.
Yeah, it's not a travel. And by the way, the officials got it right because they didn't call it travel. In fact, if there's anything about a travel on that play by our viewers, try to take a peek as to when Bledsoe lets the ball go, because he comes back down, and that is a question of whether he released it on a third step. And that's the thing to look at.
Let's move on to the Nuggets versus Heat. And it's never clear for what a clear path foul is. I feel like people are always trying to say it is or it's not. We have Chalmers doing a foul at midcourt, and there was no clear path called here, and there was some real concern about this. Ronnie, give us that breakdown. What is that rule, and why was this not a clear path foul?
Well, first of all, it was not a clear path foul, and it was adjudicated correctly. And by the way, with clear path fouls now, we used to have to do it immediately by, videotaping in our mind what actually occurred. Today, the officials do the same thing, except they have one little adjunct to it. They can go to the monitor on clear path fouls. Remember one thing a couple of things. One is the player has to have no defender in front of him in his path, or even in front of him not directly in his path. That negates a clear path. The ball also has to be above the tip of the circle. So that is also occurring when the new team gets the ball. But the problem in this part is does Lawson have control of the ball? And he doesn't really have it on the dribble. The ball kind of rolls over the top of his hand. Now, had he had control on the dribble, that side-to-side contact would have been a clear path. He did not have control, and it was a quick referencing to the monitor by the official. He saw it immediately, And I think the game went on rather quickly after that.
Okay, so let's get it really clear. Three things it sounds like. The ball has to be above the circle, the top of the key area of the attacking basket. Second, we have to have a defender between the offensive player and the basket. And lastly, the player must have possession of the ball when he's getting fouled for that clear path to be called.
Now, we know we have a fourth clear path that if a guy has possession and the ball is released, where a football pass and the offensive player is running to receive it and gets tripped up, that is also a clear path foul, especially if he's on the side or behind him. So remember, possession is key. Possession's got to start at the top of the key, meaning someone had to have it. And when that ball or the person passes the top of the key on a pass, then you're dealing with clear path. A little bit difficult, but we'll see some more during the season, and we'll talk about it again.
Fascinating stuff. Again, more educational stuff. It's by the second, people are getting smarter. Let's move on to our last play, which was very controversial. Kyrie Irving, after the Cavaliers were able to stop the Warriors from scoring to win the game at the end of regulation, we see Kyrie Irving calling a timeout, and we actually see the baseline referee put his hand up, blow the whistle. The clock does stop briefly for a timeout that the Cavaliers did not have. However, there was no timeout awarded because, well, first of all, Ronnie, tell us what would happen if you call a timeout at the end of the game when you didn't have a timeout to call?
Well, an excessive timeout results, the rules have changed, but today is pretty strong in that if you call an excessive timeout and the officials recognize it and there's no stopping of it, sometimes someone will call a timeout and then the coach immediately say, no, we don't want the timeout. And that's understandable because the officials got to kind of absorb the information of do you want it or you don't want it. But however, in this particular case, if you call an excessive timeout, it's an automatic technical foul for calling the timeout, and you can have the timeout, but you are not going to get the ball on the throw-in. It goes also to the opposing team. So it's really a strong penalty today, stronger than it used to be. So in this case, you have the official on the baseline appearing to call timeout. He blows the whistle. If you notice the clock, it doesn't run to 0. It stops at 2. He points to the team's bench, which was Cleveland, to sort of qualify the timeout and give it. But then the clock returns and goes to 0. So there is some confusion on this play, not having been in the huddle of the officials possibly during the break, the change from the 4th to the 5th period or the overtime. Maybe there was something more information that disqualified that timeout. Maybe there was also a player or coach that did not want the timeout. So in this situation, I think common sense on the play and a better and more information coming in could satisfy the result. However, we all see the initial play.
Interesting. Okay, because certainly, like at the college level, we had seen Chris Webber famously call a timeout that they didn't have, and that basically ended the game for them. This would have ended the game, most likely if Steph Curry goes to the line. He's not going to miss that free throw, I don't think. So that I guess that can't come into play. Really, the refs can't really say to themselves, "Well, this is going to decide the game." The only thing that they could have said to themselves is, "Well, if the coach was able to wave it off right away, maybe we can kind of not call it." Is that the only way they get out of this one?
Yeah, I think that's the only way to get out of it because, if you do it too overtly, now the official did it, but he was in the back. The timeouts and things that are really big are covered by the officials on the perimeter. They see a lot of what's going on in the game. The game is in front of them. But in the case with the official on the baseline, I think he reacted quickly, and that's okay because Kylie reacted kind of quickly, thinking that was the thing to do. But maybe the greater heads that were on the perimeter recognized we don't want the timeout. We don't need it. We don't have it. Okay. Don't think about him. It happened so quickly. In Chris Webber's case, he really made it very notable and very noticeable. I mean, he was walking around pivoting, so to speak, with the timeout signal, and it became too noticeable, and you couldn't stop that. But in this place, you can stop it if it's because sometimes people react too quickly, and there's a little room there. There's a little room there for cushion.
All right, good. I mean, I guess it's reminiscent of, in the college game when they throw the ball to the free throw shooter, sometimes the guy is still getting back into his position, lining up for the rebound, and they don't call that. And I feel like there's sort of maybe that notion there as well, where the pro game they allow a little bit more of that leeway for certain things. I would hope, because otherwise, this is kind of a blown call that the Warriors should have had a chance to win the game in overtime. I believe they won it anyway, so I think everything ended up being okay. But certainly a curious call and interesting how that played out.
Well, worthy of a discussion. I'm not making it light. I mean, there's a responsibility to make sure a player wants a timeout, and that's good basketball officiating. Not do you want a timeout because you don't have any. Do you really want the timeout?
Yeah.
And the guy says, yes, I do. I said, well, you got it, because and then you take the penalty. But I think in the immediacy of it, there is some room for common sense. And some of the great things about NBA rules are that we have learned how to make our rules much more simple. And I think they're the probably most simplest and best rules ever in basketball, because they recognize the nuances in the game. And just like block charge is probably more interesting on the NBA level than it is more constructed in other levels.
Absolutely. Well, this was by far our most educational episode we've had of Court Call, with things that I guarantee people didn't either know or it was in their mind as far as what these fundamentals are and what the rules are and how they're interpreted by the referee. So what a way to end 2013 and move into 2014 with. We'll have a whole other slate of great calls, I'm sure. Ronnie, thanks for coming on the show, and a real pleasure.
Thank you, Coach Nick, and Happy New Year to you and to all the fans. And we're learning something all the day. Every day, and 214 ought to be a real good one.
Absolutely. And don't forget, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in?
I'm in, Coach. Thanks for having me again.